Okay, welcome to Ivory GC. Today we're joined by Ryan McElduff, General Counsel at ICC Industries. With over 2 decades of experience in commercial litigation, insurance, and international trade law, Ryan has built a career advising businesses on complex legal and regulatory challenges. In this episode, we'll explore his journey from private practice to in-house leadership, the unique legal issues facing the chemical industry, and his insights on managing risk in a global business environment. Ryan, welcome. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Brian. I hope we can get to some of that stuff.
I'm sure we will. I'll be the guide, but why don't we start with you just tell us a little bit about your current company, your current role, and what industry ICC is in, and we'll talk about your current experience.
Okay. ICC Industries is a family-owned company. It started out as a chemical trading operation, one individual with a phone who started trading chemicals usually acquired in the U.S. to post-Second World War Europe, where he had left after the fun times that happened, if you will.
Sure.
And over the years, that trading operation grew to be the main focus of the company. But along the way, he picked up some manufacturing interest in the chemical and plastics space in general. Right now, we are winding down the commodities operation, so that is a smaller part of the business than it was, and soon will be not a part of the business at all. We have 4 operating entities that are focused on manufacturing. There's a large plastics manufacturing entity in the U.S. and with one facility in the U.K. They primarily focus on custom sheet, so large pieces of plastic that are then taken and formed into other things by other people, as well as additives and compounding for plastic sheet, and a separate entity within that group that makes things out of plastic, if you will, packaging, design equipment, things like that. We have a specialty chemical manufacturing entity with 2 factories in the U.S. They focus on additives, primarily in the plastic additives and lubrication space. We have a paint manufacturer in Romania. They also make resin as well. And the last entity is a nutraceutical company, if you will. It was sort of an odd fit, but it's a legacy company that's been around for a while. Their main product is psyllium husk fiber. It's generally a digestion aid. So it's a strange group of companies, but it's a lot of fun, a lot of different things to do.
How long have you been with ICC?
Coming up on 6 years.
So. Okay. And have you been in the general counsel role for the duration of that time?
Yes, I was hired to be their GC.
And is this the first GC hire you've had, or to kind of take us through your experience of what led to you joining ICC?
As with most things in life, it kind of happenstance. Stumbled into it, and it was an opportunity that was the right thing for me at the right time. I was a commercial litigator for years. As my primary practice, started out in a boutique admiralty aviation and construction firm, then moved to a slightly larger, or much larger firm where I focused on professional liability insurance for the most part for a few years, and then moved into a predominantly litigation practice in marine energy and transportation, commercial insurance, and then as I did that for 10 or 12 years, you pick up all sorts of things on the way. I had a former colleague who had worked with ICC, and she was transitioning elsewhere. She was not the GC, she was an AGC at the time, and let me know that they were looking for a GC. So she introduced me, and as those things go, that's usually how you find your way in the door, is somebody does the introduction for you, and I'm very thankful for her help.
Yeah. How have you seen the company progress or evolve over the last 6 years since you've been there?
It's been an interesting time. I had joined the company in July of 2019, so was just really getting settled when the world changed for most of us. So we've been mostly remote since March of 2020, which has been a challenge in and of itself. But the company itself has managed to be pretty steady, if not done very well over those years. We had some turnover at the highest levels of the commodity operation over the last 2 years or so, which has been a challenge. But other than that, everything has been consistent and strong.
Yeah. And your legal team, how big is that? Are you a solo, or do you have others with you?
Currently, I have one full-time attorney in Romania. We have 3 separate specialists, if you will, on retainer for the various things that we need. I did have one full-time attorney here in New York, but with the downsizing, we had to restructure the department as well. He's moved on and he's doing well as far as I know. But yeah, so we have a paralegal that works part-time, as well as an administrator that works part-time as well.
Okay. And so as within ICC, what are you seeing? Legal functions can be certainly versatile and handle a lot of responsibilities across the organization. What are you seeing coming up the most, at least either in your day-to-day or just, in some of your team members day-to-day?
Just about everything. I mean, I think that is the most fun part of the job, is you don't quite know what's coming across your desk. We have all the challenges that everyone else is having with the current administration and their attempts to change the world. So we're dealing with the immigration questions, tariff questions, those sorts of things. But the last administration had its goals as well. So we were dealing with increased scrutiny in the environmental world and increased scrutiny in the EH&S world as well. I mean, it's
runs the gamut.
Yep.
Yeah. So your career started in private practice before transitioning to general counsel at ICC. What led you to make the shift, and what were the biggest adjustments for you?
For me, it took me the better part of 20 years to realize that private practice really wasn't for me. It doesn't fit the way I think, and I don't have the personality for a law firm. I tend to try to be a cooperative, if you will, and productive, and move towards a single goal. And I know some attorneys don't want to hear this, but law firms can be somewhat cannibalistic and lots of internal fighting. And it was never something that sat well with me. And again, it took me a long time to realize that was just because I was in the wrong part of the law, if you will.
And you mentioned that you think differently than maybe traditional outside counsel lawyer. How so? Can you provide kind of an example or flesh that out a bit?
I focus on fixing the problem, avoiding the next problem, as opposed to fighting about every single issue. You can have a 6-month to a year-long fight on a discovery issue in a litigation, and at the end of it, you're right where you were before. You might have another piece of information, but you still don't know what the end result is going to be, and you've spent tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars of your client's money, and you haven't gotten them any closer to where they want to be. So it really is, for me, an iterative process. You have to understand where you want to be, and that in private practice, you look at that as, okay, we know that we're going to be trying this case X number of years down the road, and this is how we want to set up the case, and this is how we're going to deal with this issue and that issue. And but that still doesn't get you to, okay, my client is fighting over $1.5 million. Should we while we have to focus on that or else we're committing malpractice and we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, is this really the best way to go about it for this particular matter or this particular client?
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas when you transfer it into in-house, you're part of those decisions as well. You're
Yeah.
part of the
Yeah.
decision of whether it's worth spending the time and the effort and the money to win that sub part when it really might not affect the end result that you're worried about.
Yeah. As a commercial litigator, how do you think you were prepared for an in-house role? What do you think you were particularly what skills have you particularly developed as a commercial litigator? And then on the flip side of that, where do you think you've had to maybe learn the most or pick up the most outside of your traditional training?
I think with the commercial litigation, you have the advantage of you see a lot of different things. You know,
Yeah.
if you're focused in a practice, like if you're a personal injury specialist and you just handle personal injury and only personal injury, it might not necessarily translate well. But if you have a broad range practice where you don't really know what's coming across your desk the next day, and you probably aren't 100% familiar with the industry or what the questions are or what the issues are, you have to take the time to stop and learn it and
Yeah.
figure out what it is. And I think that translates very well to an in-house role because you're just the lawyer in the in-house
Yeah.
role. You don't know how things are made. You don't really understand the sales process or the product acquisition process or what drives this or what drives that. So you have to, and you never will, but you have to take the time to understand it enough to at least get the project that's in front of you done and done right and done efficiently. So I think commercial litigation transfers well with that. The other thing that transfers very well from a high stakes commercial litigation practice is you're used to putting out fires. You're literal and figurative. So if something goes haywire on a day-to-day basis, you're at least trained to the point where you can take the step back and assess the situation, do the triage, deal with the problem in a maybe proactive and calmer way than you otherwise wouldn't. So I think those are the skills that transfer well. I think the skills that don't transfer particularly well, you can drill yourself into a box in private practice. You can spend 3 days focusing on tracing down one issue and thousands of pages of documents. You can review a legal issue and research it down to, I personally in private practice, there were times where I remember being in the basement of the St. John's University insurance law department with the librarian going through hanging files where they had clipped out articles from 150 or 200 years ago because I was trying to find one article that was the only article ever written on the subject of the insurance clause we were fighting on about. And this was the only place in the country that had that particular article, but nobody knew where it was, and it wasn't electronic or any format like that, but we needed it. So I could spend an entire day in the basement of that law library with a very excited law librarian who had never seen anybody actually ask for anything before. So those sorts of things don't transition well because you've got 1,000 other things that are just as important that need to be addressed.
Or that one thing is really important to a private practitioner, but in the grand scheme of the business as a whole, it's not nearly as important, and therefore worth the investment. So that makes a lot of sense.
You see it on this side. You understand the frustration that clients have with attorneys. They're outside attorneys now on this side because you'll tell them 10 times that it doesn't matter and why are we focusing on this, and and they still want to know.
With ICC operating on a global scale, how do you navigate international trade laws and cross-border transactions?
It depends on the entity you're talking about. Since we were a trading house, a commodity trader. We physically moved product around the world. We bought product to one part of the world, got it to the other part of the world, and the goal was to do that in a process that you made money somehow.
Yeah.
So how the company was set up was we had offices or representatives in different places around the world. So you basically have local expertise. So most of the other companies have built off of that, but still international trade is both very complicated and also not complicated at all at the same time because it's been standardized. I mean, I guess marine insurance would be a great example. You can get a marine insurance policy now, and there are clauses in there that were written 300 or 400 years ago, and they sound like gibberish and they sound like nonsense. But the reality is they've been litigated so many times that everyone in the world knows exactly what that means. So everyone has the same expectations. Everybody has the same understanding. So while it seems daunting, as long as you have people involved that understand the procedures and practices as they were, it's fairly routine. I mean, to the point where clerks handle most of it, and you have standardized forms and standardized things. There's with chemicals, there are registration issues and tariff issues and things like that that you need to be familiar with. But again, you deal with outside expertise. There's no reason for me to be, for example, dealing with the Romanian authorities. We don't need to translate something 16 times and I'll never understand what it is. But if I get somebody in Bucharest that understands this from the local perspective and can explain it to me, then we can work through just about anything relatively quickly.
So what do you typically use outside counsel for, aside from the local subject matter expertise? What do you tend to handle in-house, and what do you go to your outside counsel partners for?
We try to handle as much as possible in-house. I would say litigation, obviously. Well, we do have one of our retained attorneys handles our local New York litigation, at least, but outside of New York, we would use local attorneys for that. And most of the time we try to avoid litigation to the extent possible. It's just a costly morass, and at the end of the day, everybody loses. But specialties, we don't have the intellectual property capabilities in-house, so we farm those out. We do work with outside counsel for environmental compliance. Again, that's a very specialized area, and there's surprisingly, particularly in the US, there's a lot of personal relationship to it. You have people that either worked in a government office or know people in the government office, and that takes you a lot farther than knowing the law and knowing the regulations and everything else. I would say also corporate formalities, particularly overseas, you need outside counsel for. So we have entities in Europe, we have entities in China, we have those are the majority of them. But there's no reason to try to understand how to do something in, for example, the Netherlands, if we can. Why spend the time to educate ourselves and figure that out and deal in a separate language, which nobody speaks here, when you could have somebody more efficiently handle it for you outside.
So what's your approach to handling disputes? When do you fight, and when do you seek resolution?
This is the commercial litigator in me. But you try to find a resolution before it gets to the dispute. So if there is a commercial resolution that can be had, fine. And our business folks are very good at smoothing things out. Maybe we have a problem on this transaction. Let's just understand that we've been working together for X number of years. Maybe we lose on this one, maybe you lose on this one, but the next one will make it up is how they are good at avoiding it. So I don't have to deal with it most of the time. But when it gets to me, that means that something has gone sideways. And I would always go revert to the commercial litigator perspective, which is you punch them in the nose, you go 100 miles an hour, your foot's on their throat. But at the same time, if they want to settle it, if they want to resolve it at any time, you're listening because nobody knows what the end result's going to be. You can never rely on a jury. You can never rely on a judge to make the right decision or make a coherent decision. You don't know what you're going to get. So at the end of the day, the only thing you can guarantee is you're going to spend a lot of money to get there. So unless it's a bet the company issue, which so far I haven't had to deal with, and I hope I never have to deal with, you're always looking for your exit ramp.
Yeah. How do you build strong relationships between the legal team and other departments to create a culture of compliance?
You have to be human, which I don't think many lawyers understand, and it's things that I find most frustrating about lawyers is you can't assume that you know something. You can't assume that you know. You certainly can't assume that you know it better than somebody that's out there. And I believe that listening, not just hearing, but listening is a skill that all lawyers lack, all people lack, but particularly young lawyers are very bad at. Because they read the law, they understand what the rules are, and they're going to be the expert about it, but nobody really cares about that. So I try to take the time while I have my predetermined assumptions about what the issues are and what the governing legal regime is going to be and what the result will be and what the answer will be, like what is the right answer. I don't go in with that. I start by you have a conversation and you have to be humor helps. Listen to people, know who they are, know a little bit about them. And the more you reach out to people and the more you indicate that you're at least trying to understand what they're trying to do, the more that they will come to you. And the other thing that's very important is I tell everybody, sometimes it's like a fire hose here. Just because I'm not answering you immediately doesn't mean I didn't see it. If it's important, let me know. If you think I'm missing something, pick up the phone. My phone is always on. I know this is leftover from private practice. You have to assume that your phone is always on. But I want all these people out there in the world to understand that they shouldn't be afraid to pick up the phone and call me. I'm not gonna bite anybody's head off. I'm not gonna be offended by it. If I've got 6 other things going on and I can't answer the phone, I won't answer the phone, but I'll call them back. And I want everybody to know that. So that's important. And I think the other thing that's really important is, again, something that lawyers struggle on is when you're communicating ideas back to the people, your internal clients, you do it in such a way that they can understand it. I mean, we were all first-year law students at some point. We had no idea how this stuff worked. We all remember those, you had 1 or 2, maybe if you're lucky, 3 good professors that could explain it to you in words you could understand. And you still have those stories in the back of your head where you figured out, I have one in my head always, a great torts professor who explained prior notice of a condition. I won't tell the story because it's too much time, but the fact he could put it in common language, he made it a joke, he made it funny, but it taught me the issue. And I always feel like I need to try to teach people the concepts and the ideas, because just because they're in sales or they're a chemist or they're some sort of operating engineer doesn't mean they're not a smart person. They will understand it if you take the time to explain it to them. And if they explain it to them, one, they have it in their head for the next time this comes up. It's a tool for them to use, which is better for everybody else involved. And they then understand, I think, that you're trying to help them and not just dictating from on high. And I think that's important. I guess the last thing that's most important is don't write like a lawyer. write like a human. Just
Yeah. Yeah.
if the way you're writing is not the way that you would speak to your friend, then you're not
Yeah.
doing it right.
Yeah. I go back, I remember, first year legal writing class, and, every answer to an issue in your brief or memorandum is, starts with yes, because, or no, because, and it's a clear and concise way of communicating, but it's less human. It is less interactive, and the relationship piece can get lost in some of that. So yeah, that definitely rings true. The role of general counsel is evolving. How do you see legal teams adapting to new regulatory and business challenges in the next 5 years?
I wish I had a crystal ball so that I could get ahead of this, but I don't know that I can tell you. I do know that there was, in a lot of companies, I expect there'll be a lot of pressure to use AI and automation tools and things along those lines. Regulatory, legal field is going to be decades behind everybody else. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It happens slowly. Are you using any AI, or have you explored any other any tools, or how do you see the role of technology playing in your legal department?
we check these things as the opportunities come up, as people approach us with ideas, but it's very hard for us to automate our processes because we have very different businesses.
Yeah,
So we have standard terms, standard documents that we use across the companies, but everyone has a different set.
yeah,
Everyone
yeah,
has different considerations. Everybody has different venue and insurance concerns. And so automating, we haven't found a tool that is even remotely workable for us. So
yeah,
it's, and at the same time, going back to what we were just talking about, I find that automating these things takes that whole human connection out of it between legal and the business side. And if you take
mm-hmm,
that connection out, then you're losing control is the wrong word, oversight's the wrong word, maybe visibility of the
mm-hmm,
business, so you understand what's going on.
mm-hmm.
Because you need people to be reaching out to you to tell you this is what we're doing, this is what we're trying to do, so that that maybe next time you see a contract that comes in, you got a different perspective, you got a different concern. I mean, we have one new product, or one new product that's coming to market from the chemical company, and the marketing of that and how they intend to sell that to the world is different from the way they've approached other products, and the IP considerations with it, because it is so unique and new, that IP is a much greater concern than it has been with the other products that they've made over the years, most of which there's very little IP protection for anymore because they've been around for so long. So when it's more of a commodity, you don't have to worry about that. You're more worried about how you're going to get it from point A to point B. When are you going to get paid? How are you going to get paid? Those things.
Yeah,
Whereas the crucial importance for the new product is we don't want somebody to try to steal it from us, because there's been decades of research and development that have gone into this, and it's time to make some money off of it.
yeah, yeah. So you've already shared a lot of advice, but if you were to consolidate, a piece of advice you'd give to a rising attorney that aspires to be in your shoes one day, what would you tell him or her?
As long as they're already an attorney, because I was serious when we talked before this, that I do caution young people trying to go to law school to seriously think about it. And maybe,
Why is that?
I know when I wound up making the decision to go to law school, it was because I was a junior in college, and I had a double major in political science and history because that's what I found interesting, and realized that there really wasn't a career that was steering me towards that I was at all interested in. So it was sort of a fallback to go to law school, because you have in your head, oh, Law and Order in my day was the big TV show. Before that, it was LA Law. So it seemed cool.
Yeah.
And it's marketed, I'm sure, intentionally as a lucrative field, but it isn't always, and it's not guaranteed. I know when I graduated from law school, the first job that I had out of law school, I was basically on par with a police officer. So not that there's anything wrong with that, but I just spent 3 more years worth of tuition to go get a job that wasn't paying anywhere near what I expected it to. So if your motivation is financial and purely financial, or glamorous, something like that, or lack of direction like I had, it might not be the best idea. But if you really understand what the industry is, and you have some sort of actual interest in the academic side of it, the thought process, the way that you approach these problems, then it's a great career. But it's not a career for everybody at all. And the number of people that burn out just proves the point. And I have had that conversation with so many attorneys or people going to law school over the years, and multiple of them have reached out to me after they've made the mistake. Some of whom were very, very successful attorneys, to say that they wish they had listened to me.
Well, it's been a pleasure listening to you for the last 30 minutes and having an interaction with you. Thank you for coming on. Wish you all the best, and I hope to have you on again at some point in the future.
Anytime.